Welcome to this session, to this seminar of the MED Confederation. You know that the MED Confederation is a rather unique platform, association combining banking institutions with the academic world, the world of the think tanks, and it was constituted a few years back to seek how in the field of finance and banking there could be cooperation among different countries around the Mediterranean to cooperate in what has been the Euro-Mediterranean Partnership. You know that we have been celebrating this last week the 25th anniversary of this Euro-Mediterranean Partnership, the Barcelona process. You know that we continue to work now with the Union for the Mediterranean for the same goals we set forth in 95. This is to build around the Mediterranean an area of peace and stability, an area of shared economic progress, and an area of dialogue and intercultural understanding among peoples around the Mediterranean. And therefore, the MED Confederation has been trying to collaborate in this general effort around the Mediterranean from its unique point of view. We have new challenges now. We know that all the partnership is only viable if it is viable from an economic point of view. And so we have these new challenges regarding the environment, regarding the climate change, regarding the new gaps that have appeared relating to the digital gap or the problems to include women, youth, etc., in the general growth around the Mediterranean. MED Confederation has chosen to focus in these 3 years its attention on final inclusion, because we have found the partners, including mainly, well, as I said, financial and banking institutions with the world of the think tanks and the academy, that this is one special, essential part of the effort to be done, and including financial education, access to finance for everybody, microfinance, crowdfinance, even now the mobile finance or the specific problems for rural finance. And well, as we will see now, because we have a prominent figure from the World Bank who's now with us and who will tell about us. The World Bank has been underlying the fact that it is a key enabler for economic development through reducing poverty and boosting prosperity. So it is a very special occasion, and for that we have an extraordinary panel of experts. We will have first a keynote speech, and this is, as the British would say, from the horse's mouth. I present my excuses for that. It's just a question of language. But genuinely from the source of the people who have been working specifically on that issue worldwide. And we have with us, nonetheless, the Vice President for Middle East and North Africa of the World Bank Group, Mr. Philippe De Fontaine. Hello. And first, we will have the address by, let me find my papers. Following the general schedule of the program, we will have first by Chris Denous, my partner from the World Saving and Retail Banking Institute in Brussels, who's a representative of the banking institutions and the savings banks around the world. to whom I now pass the floor for his salute, knowing that he is not with us presently, as we are not all of us, but he had some engagements, but he is addressing his words to us anyway.
Ladies and gentlemen, dear colleagues, as president of the MED Confederation, I would like to welcome everyone who is joining us today from many different countries, especially in the Mediterranean region, to our first virtual MEDCon webinar. The year 2020 has nearly come to an end, and the corona crisis is still overshadowing many parts of our lives, privately and professionally. While you are attending this webinar, chances are that you have been in a full or partial lockdown since several weeks or months now, imposed by our governments to contain the spread of the pandemic. The news about the recent breakthrough in the development of a vaccine and the swift emergency approval by health authorities in the first countries seem to be the light at the end of the tunnel that we have so desperately waited for. To many, it gives hope to return to a new normality soon. However, the unprecedented toll that the pandemic has taken on economic activity cannot be overlooked. In the Mediterranean, such as in other parts of the world, this has put serious pressure on many vulnerable households and businesses. And while already many businesses are at the edge of their existence or even had to close down completely, the full extent of the crisis will probably only become apparent when the storm is over. While increasing and broadening access to finance is not a magical solution, it does increase the resilience of individuals, households and businesses. Government aid reaches destination much quicker. Overall management of revenue and expenses is more efficient, and when there is a formal relationship with a bank, it is easier to obtain a loan to bridge a difficult period. You might be aware of the fact that the WSBI is currently working on a project called Scale to Save that is funded by MasterCard. Recent research that we have carried out in the context of that project shows that the pandemic has a profound influence on the behavior of the local customers. Electronic payments have surged, customers have applied for payment holidays, and non-performing loans are increasing. That also shows that when a financial relationship exists, clients can be more flexible and get more help to weather the effects of the crisis. Ladies and gentlemen, in previous crisis moments, banks have unfortunately often been a part of the problem. Now, I am happy to say that we are part of the solution, or at least we can be. We need to seize this historic opportunity to stand alongside our customers and give them the help they need to get through this crisis. At the beginning of my speech, I said that the vaccination campaign will probably be the light that we see at the end of the tunnel. Once we get out of the tunnel and the economy gets back on track, we need to be ready. That's why we need to be at work now with our customers. Ladies and gentlemen, the MED Confederation promotes socioeconomic cooperation in the Mediterranean region. This objective and the daily activities of the MEDCON member organizations put us in an ideal position to contribute to financial inclusion in the region. Financial inclusion is at the core of the daily activities of WSBI and of the MEDCON as well, as it is at the core of the activities of many of the other members. Let us put our competences and our knowledge in common so that we can make a concrete difference for the daily lives of our fellow citizens. I'm delighted to be able to present you a lineup of excellent speakers today from institutions ranging from the World Bank to the European Investment Bank that will provide us with their expert insights and food for thought in this discussion. I would now like to give the floor to my colleague, Senen Florenza, President of the Executive Committee, European Institute of the Mediterranean, to say a few words before we start the discussion. Thank you for joining us, and stay safe and healthy, because unfortunately I cannot stay with you due to urgent family matters. Thank you once again, and have a good conference.
So, thank you very much. It's as you see, we have had some problems, but the important message, I think, was that banks that may have been a part of the problem in the past are now being part of the solution. That's always good news. Because if they are to be part of the solution, they will solve really a lot of things, as they have done ever, but now in a much better way. And fortunately enough, we had the written text below the image of Christenus. And now, of course, it is really my pleasure to give the floor to Mr. Philippe Belhaj. Mr. Philippe Belhaj, as I said, is the Vice President for the Middle East and North Africa at the World Bank Group. And he has been in charge of almost everything at the World Bank Group. He has been the Chief of Staff to the President of the World Bank. He has been in charge of problems for Asia and for the Middle East, especially during all the crises for Syria and its the refugee crisis and its impact on the region. And he's been the World Bank Special Representative to the United Nations in New York. And he has been on the field as well, for example, as the World Country Manager for Morocco of the World Bank from 2002 to 2007. And so, Mr. Belhaj, it's all our pleasure, our honor to have you with us in the name of all partners in this unique platform of the MED Confederation. Welcome, Vilas, and you have the floor.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Excellency. Thank you to all the colleagues and the friends around the table. I see many friends here. Brahim, Asma, Jaloul, of course, whom I met when I was in Morocco, actually, years back. I had less gray hair. It's really a pleasure to be with you, and a pleasure to see that Mr. Nous mentioned that the banks are now, have been part of a problem. Now they're part of the solution. Let me just argue that the World Bank has always been part of the solution. Let me start by saying that, look, when it comes to financial inclusion, the World Bank, we really believe that this is a key enabler to reducing extreme poverty and boost shared prosperity. You mentioned it earlier. We see the development of digital financial services as a way for to assist the Middle East and North Africa countries in addressing some key challenges. And the key challenges we see today in the Middle East and North Africa, in gender divide, big issue. And we see it today, actually. Gender rights are being eroded in many places, including in my own country. Limited competition in the banking sector. It is an issue that we need to address. Youth unemployment. I will say it now and I will say it at the end of my talk. By 2050, because of the demographics, in the Middle East and North Africa, from Morocco to Iran, these are the countries that we cover. We will be looking at 300 million young people knocking at the door of the job market. 300 million. And this is in 30 years. And they will not be coming in one shot in 2050. They are starting now. This is going to be putting tremendous pressure on all of the countries and on all of the neighborhood, Europe. But also this constitutes an amazing opportunity to use that energy for good, through good policies. And of course, one other big challenge is the large informal economy. And there we will always distinguish about the formal economy the informal economy that we can formalize and that is basically to be outlawed. And this is also something that we will discuss. So financial inclusion is, as you mentioned, critical to promote social and economic inclusion in job creation, notably for households and small and medium enterprises. SMEs in our region, constitute the backbone of the economies. And clearly we need to push this agenda forward. And this agenda and this issue has become even more relevant in the context of, obviously, of COVID-19. So the financial inclusion in MENA, including the Gulf countries, has been accelerating in the recent years. But there is still a delta. There is still a lot of potential for improvement. A delta between, the MENA region and, the advanced economies. And even in the MENA region, things are not all equal. We see the GCC, for instance, they're having a much more advanced financial inclusion drive than in a number of other countries. So the variation between the countries in MENA and various segments of societies in terms of financial inclusion is something that we should be looking at. Just a couple of numbers. Account ownerships for adults, for instance, in Bahrain is at about 9%. In Kuwait, it's about 90%. When you look at Egypt, it's about 35 to 40%. Tunisia, we're looking at between 37 and 40%. So we are really very far back, and we need to improve there, and we need to move forward. And of course, financial inclusion starts with having an account, and accounts only matter if people actively use them to make payments, to manage financial risk, and to save for the future. And frankly, there as well, the statistics are not that great. MENA is still very much behind in that. And this is something that we need to keep pushing, and we need to keep advocating, and we need to urge the banking sector, as Mr. Nous mentioned, to really be the solution, to really offer those kinds of incentives to allow people to get in. So the COVID-19 pandemic and the related massive lockdown gave a strong impetus to acceleration of the establishment of digital payment ecosystems. Some of the central banks in the region, I see it in Egypt, I see it in Tunisia, I see it very much in Morocco, have deployed digital payments for social and financial protection measures to reach a wide array of citizens. And this is very much welcome. We in the bank are working very closely with the Tunisian Central Bank, with the Egyptian Central Bank, and with the Moroccan Central Bank, and with the Jordanian Central Bank in pushing this agenda forward. We started a bit, if I may say, without a smile, with the Central Bank of Lebanon. Unfortunately, you know what's happening in that country, and you know the turmoil surrounding the central bank there. So we'll wait for things to calm down a bit, and then we will re-engage. Access to finance for businesses is also a very important topic. SMEs, as I mentioned earlier, represent a significant part of the world economy and are one of the strongest drivers of economic development, of innovation, and employment. Because, and we see it, most formal jobs in emerging markets are small and medium enterprise jobs. SME development has become a high priority for many governments in both developing and developed economies, and the MENA region is obviously no exception. As I mentioned earlier, SMEs are the backbone of the economies in our region. But the lack of access to finance is still a critical barrier. Barrier to growth for these SMEs. Domestic credit to private sector in the Middle East and North Africa, about a year and a half ago, was only 57% of GDP. This is compared to 157 and 55% in East Asia and the Pacific. Between 57% in our own region, again, the southern rim of the Mediterranean and the rest, and East Asia and the Pacific, 155%. 88% in Europe and Central Asia. So the gap is very wide, and there is a huge effort that is needed for us to move forward. While the SMEs in MENA represent about 96% of registered companies and about half of the employment, they account only for 7% of total bank lending. This is the lowest by far in the whole world. The COVID-19 pandemic has made access to financial resources by SMEs even more critical agenda for all of us. SMEs face both the sharp drop in demand and a sudden temporary lockdown of business activity. So all of this backbone of the economy is caught in between these very two hard drivers. And there is a need to be doing something there. Digital financial services could be a real game changer for the SMEs in the Middle East and North Africa, both by reducing some of the constraints on bank lending and also by opening new financing resources, such as crowdfunding, for instance, seed capital, and peer-to-peer electronic platforms. And I know that these issues are very dear to the heart of my friend Jalul, because even when we were not talking necessarily about digital economy, he was pushing as a minister for the way to diversify these sources of financing. And now it is even more pressing than ever to really keep pushing that agenda. Recently, the region has seen a big push towards digital finance. And this is the outcome of the domestic environment in several countries becoming more enabling, facilitating innovation and bolstering entrepreneurs who seek to take advantage of business opportunities through new financial products and services. New players, including fintech startups, are challenging the status quo and offering customers with alternatives to the traditional channels to access finance. And in some countries, a number of players have entered the market for the provision of mobile payment services. In the MENA region, and these numbers are quite interesting and important, fintech startups have raised over $100 million in funding in the past decade, and over 24 million in 2017 alone. Huge spike. And in the current MENA fintech market is estimated at $2 billion and is expected to witness an annual growth of $125 million until 2022. And this is according to our International Finance Corporation, IFC colleagues. So new digital economies can help to close the SME finance gap by enabling smaller firms to tap into alternative sources, funding, all that thanks to the data generated by their digital footprint. So SMEs' own digital transformation can reduce their operational costs and increase their productivity. Let me conclude by calling all of us, and obviously the government with which we interact, to regulate this whole new area with an open mind. First of all, to regulate and not to legislate. This is really important. We need to keep as much flexibility and adaptability in our instruments. And as a lawyer, and nobody's perfect, I have really an issue with this over legislation that is a scourge in our region. we adopt laws for everything. And obviously that makes us extremely difficult to manage and to adapt. And this means that legal and regulatory frameworks should be predictable, should be risk-based, and should be fair, and should be, as I said, flexible and adaptable. They should allow for new entrants. They should be technology neutral and not impose excessive compliance costs on regulated entities. And this is one point I'd like to really stress. Above and beyond the issue of financial inclusion, there is something that is really important in our region. The whole discussion about contestability of markets. What we see in a large number of our countries are generally large monopolies taking large segments of the economy and basically stopping any type and any possibility for real competition into those markets. And that obviously, limits the possibilities for young people to get into the markets, for young people to be able to engage, and for young people to be able to show that their creativity can bring about a positive economic dynamic. So this is something that we are really pushing in the Middle East and North Africa region. So let me finish with one key issue that I really feel very, very passionate about. And this is what I mentioned earlier, the youth angle. Digital payments and financial services can help young people in MENA access resources to build their job skills and manage income sources. I told you that by 2050, 300 million young people are going to be accessing or asking for the job market. Jobs need to be created, and those jobs are not going to be created in the public sector. These jobs will be created in the private sector, and these jobs will be created if there is enough push and a platform that is solid enough on the banking sector to allow for these young people to get their ideas, their creativity financed. And I'll finish with this. There is a statistic, data that came about a couple of months ago from the Arab Barometer. Young people in the Middle East and North Africa, and in the Mediterranean, obviously, their main issue is not the absence of money, it's not the absence of wealth, it is the absence of opportunities. They don't see any opportunities. And because they don't see opportunities, they want to get out, they want to get away, they want to emigrate, they want to go on the other side of the shore of the Mediterranean. And this is something that we need to work on tirelessly, because we have enough in our part of the world, in the southern rim of the Mediterranean, we have enough potential and enough ways of keeping our youth that are open, that are educated, people who have creativity and who have demonstrated that they can do a lot of incredible things. We need to keep them where they are in order for them to help build or rebuild the economies of our region. So let me stop here. Thank you so very much for inviting me. I will need to, unfortunately, go to another meeting that I have immediately right now. But that was a great opportunity to meet all of you. And I see Ibrahim big on the screen. I say hello to him, and hopefully we'll be seeing you soon. Bye-bye.
You have to unmute yourself.
So I was thanking Mr. Philippe De Fontaine, Vice President of the Middle East and North Africa of the World Bank Group. And now we go for the round table. And I pass the floor to Mr. Chelou Nayet. Chelou, you have the floor. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. And thank you, Ferry. Thank you very much for having accepted our invitation today. I know how busy you are, and so the fact that you've accepted is really an honor for us. So good afternoon, everyone, and thank you again for having accepted to join us at this MED Confederation webinar, which covers the highly topical subject of financial inclusion, whose importance was significantly heightened in the midst of the coronavirus pandemic. For those who don't know me, my name is Jaloul Ayed. I'm the former president of MED Confederation, and presently its honorary president. I'm also the former Minister of Finance of Tunisia, following a long career in international banking and finance. It is my privilege today to moderate this session on financial inclusion in a post-pandemic Mediterranean region. It has become obvious during this time of crisis that financial inclusion can be a powerful development tool, as Mr. Belhaj was saying, for improving access to finance for vulnerable and struggling micro, small, and medium-sized enterprises and the community at large. The crisis has also highlighted the importance of digital financial services in so many different ways and their role in achieving sustainable development. So, Farid, you're absolutely right. This is an area of focus that we really need to work on. From a macroeconomic perspective, the promise of financial inclusion is enhancing economic growth, and this has been proven time and again by empirical studies, and also narrowing income inequalities and reducing poverty and the gaps between different stakeholders. And therefore, we have to bridge those gaps between state institutions, firms, households, and the society at large. So we shall be navigating across all the themes around financial inclusion amidst the coronavirus pandemic with the top-notch panelists today who have gracefully accepted to take part in this event. And I'm honored to briefly introduce them to you, starting with Mr. Philippe De Fontaine. He has been having some problems. I hope that, technical problems. I hope that he's with us now. Mr. Philippe De Fontaine is Honorary Vice President of the European Investment Bank. He's Director General of Compagnie Financière Richelieu. He's also a member of the Board of Directors of BMC Bank of Africa in Casablanca, where he chairs the Risk Committee. I must add that Philippe joined the board of BMCE shortly after I left this bank, where I was board member and president of its management committee for 11 years. Previously, Mr. De Fontaine was Senior Vice President of the European Investment Bank from 2003 to 2015. I have known Philippe for a long time and bear witness to the tremendous job he has done on behalf of EIB in the North African region. We are also happy today to welcome His Excellency, Mr. Ibrahim El-Badawi, the former Minister of Finance and Economic Planning of Sudan. Presently, Mr. Badawi is the Managing Director of the Economic Research Forum and President of Forum Euro-Méditerranéen des Instituts de Sciences Économiques, FEMIS. Very much welcome, Your Excellency. I'm also delighted to introduce my dear friend, Professor Reem Ayadi. Reem is the founder and president of the Euro-Mediterranean Economies Association, EMEA. She's also founder and director of the Euro-Mediterranean Network of Economic Studies, MES. I'm sure many of you are receiving the high quality publications of this organization. Reem is also honorary professor at Cass Business School and member of the Center for Banking Research at the City University of London. But she has many other feathers on her hat. So I invite you to discover her a little more by checking her impressive CV in the briefing documents that were sent before. I'm also delighted to introduce my dear friend, Mrs. Esma Ben Hamida, who is co-founder and board member of Inda Tamwil in Tunisia, which is the largest and most prestigious microfinance institution. I've always liked to refer to Esma as the mother of microfinance in Tunisia. It's a statement to her tremendous contribution in this field. She's also the founding member of Sanabel, the microfinance network of Arab countries, and was elected twice to Sanabel's board between 2002 and 2008. And she has served also as the chairperson for this organization from 2006 to 2008. ESMA received several awards, including that of Outstanding Social Entrepreneur in the Middle East and North Africa by the prestigious Schwab Foundation and the World Economic Forum. And last but not least, I'm happy to introduce Mr. Haider El-Baghdadi, who is very well versed in the field that we are discussing today in his capacity as head of the 2GIZ implemented program pertaining, one, to financial inclusion in the MENA region, FEMENA, and promotion of access to finance for SMEs in Egypt, PAF SME or PAF SME. Prior to his current position, Mr. Baghdadi worked for the Alliance for Financial Inclusion, the world-leading organization on financial inclusion, as a policy manager in the areas of digital financial services and SME finance. So, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to all of you, and thank you again for your participation today. You have all received a list of suggested topics that will guide our discussions. So without further ado, let me first yield the floor to Mr. Philippe De Fontaine. If he is with us, I hope he is with us, so that he can share his views on the subject matter. Thank you very much. Philippe?
Merci beaucoup, Jalal. Comme j'ai manqué le début, nous prenons tous la parole en anglais ou en français?
Same.
Ok. Alors, je vais profiter du français. D'abord, pour vous remercier tous en vous priant d'excuser le fait que je vous ai rejoint qu'en cours de route. Il y a des travaux en cours ici et c'est le monde numérique qui nous apprend les pièges. Mais je suis très heureux que vous ayez pris cette initiative, non seulement pour retrouver les hémisphères autour de la Méditerranée, mais aussi pour témoigner du sentiment que m'apporte le fait d'être devenu un praticien de l'économie maintenant, soit du côté européen, soit du côté méditerranéen du Sud, à travers Bank of Africa. Effectivement, j'ai le plaisir de le comité des risques. Pour moi, ce qui est absolument marquant, c'est un contraste que j'arrive mal à m'expliquer. Et j'espère que cette séance aujourd'hui et votre thème l'année prochaine permettra de mettre fin à ce paradoxe entre les milliards qu'on évoque d'un côté sous forme de plan de relance, notamment plan de relance européen, et les besoins criants qui existent au sud de la Méditerranée et la difficulté d'atteindre les institutions de microfinance. Je m'explique. Bien évidemment, dans cette crise Covid-19, la première préoccupation des autorités de chacun des pays est domestique. Ça se comprend bien, on ne peut pas les critiquer pour cela, et il y a une mobilisation tous azimuts, pas toujours coordonnée, mais y compris du point de vue financier, et je vois que notamment la Banque européenne d'investissement a réussi à accélérer de façon considérable ces décaissements, y compris vers le sud de la Méditerranée, mais ceci se fait beaucoup plus facilement pour les très gros projets que pour atteindre par capillarité les véritables besoins sociaux de création d'emplois, d'éviter des faillites, des notes. Et c'est là que vous mettez l'accent aujourd'hui. Donc moi, je serais très intéressé à vous écouter les uns et les autres parce que j'ai l'impression qu'on a donc un contraste entre 2020 et 2021. Pour 2020, c'est la crise sanitaire pour l'essentiel avec des réponses domestiques pour l'essentiel et laisser la place aux autorités nationales. Je prends l'exemple du Maroc que je connais un petit peu mieux que d'autres. Le programme Oxygène lancé avec le plein soutien notamment de la Banque centrale est une excellente initiative. On pourrait se référer dans un autre pays comme la France aux prêts garantis par l'État. Donc l'État arrive en première mobilisation, il va amener le secteur bancaire à décaisser rapidement parce que le secteur bancaire est rassuré par l'existence d'une garantie d'État qui peut aller à 90-95%. Mais c'est plus facile pour les grandes entreprises et les grosses PME que pour la microfinance qui manque de fonds propres. Et j'espère, je vais écouter en particulier ESMA pour savoir comment elle témoigne du passage du cap de l'année 2020. Mais je pense qu'il y a urgence maintenant, pour préparer le cap de l'année 2021, à préparer des dispositifs financiers qui permettent de renforcer les fonds propres des institutions de microfinance qui ne représentent pas des montants macroéconomiques très significatifs, mais qui sont les seuls qui sont capables d'aller jusqu'au sein des villages, des quartiers, des entreprises de toute petite taille. Et les dispositifs nationaux vont être insuffisants pour cela. Solidarité transméditerranéenne serait très certainement nécessaire. Donc, pour moi, c'est ça le passage qu'il faut réussir. Faut-il le faire sous forme de réseau? Faut-il le faire avec le soutien des banques multilatérales? Vraisemblablement. Mais je crois qu'il y aurait entre guillemets, une récompense de solidarité à demander au système bancaire. Il y a, je recite de nouveau le Maroc, un fonds de solidarité qui a été créé. Je crois qu'il faudrait créer systématiquement des poches en direction des institutions de microfinance. Je m'arrête là à ce stade, mais j'espère entendre le témoignage de ceux qui pratiquent à l'heure actuelle pour savoir s'ils partagent ce sentiment d'un besoin de ressaisissement pour l'année 2021.
Merci beaucoup, Philippe. On va écouter Asma tout à l'heure pour avoir son feedback. I'm now happy to introduce Mr. Ibrahim Al-Badawi, if he's available. Yes, he's available. All right. Ibrahim, marhaba.
أهلا مرحبا. للأسف يعني I experienced some technical difficulties, intermittent disruptions, but I hope that it allows me to continue within my brief presentation. So shall I start?
Yes, please go ahead, Akh Ibrahim.
Okay. Thank you very much. I would like to take this opportunity to thank the Mediterranean Confederation for organizing this very important webinar on this defining real issue going forward in the post-COVID-19 economy, which affect definitely the Mediterranean basin, both north and particularly the southern Mediterranean. I'm actually, I'm not a citizen of the Mediterranean myself, being from Sudan, but I'm very much relevant to the debate on the Mediterranean on my capacity as the managing director of the Economic Research Forum and the president of the Economies Association, which is an association of institutions, research and policy institutions on the two sides of the Mediterranean. Certainly, the COVID-19 pandemic has huge implications for the people and the economy of the entire globe, including, of course, our region. And in particular, the implications of leveling the infection field, the infection curve, has a mirror image impact on creating a recession curve at the economic front. And this has affected both the macro and the micro perspective in terms of the economic policy debate. I think one of the most important issues that emerges in the context of dealing with the fallout from the pandemic is a deep thinking about the social contract. We think about allocation of resources in the Mediterranean region and MENA region in general. It has and continues to be dominated by commodity subsidies. And the debate about commodity subsidies is very political debate because it involves entrenched interest associated with urban bias and the kind of interest, the political interest of the regimes in the region to try to placate, if you will, the urban middle class through a web of subsidies. If we just compare some ratios of how the GDP is allocated or the budget is allocated, we found that, for example, say in the case of Jordan, the fuel subsidy, this is before the reform, the fuel subsidy accounts for about 3 or 4 times the entire budget for education and health. For the case of Sudan, the country where I came from, and when I was the Minister of Finance, I tried to make this point and influence the debate, is that the petroleum subsidies account for 12% of the GDP and about 35% of the budget. So this social contract that influence the allocation of resources does not belong to the future, is not really at all consistent with the objective, the overarching objective of creating jobs for youth and responding to the new emerging digital transformation or digital revolution that's going to shape, that's already started to shape, the regional and global economies. So what has happened as a result of the COVID-19 is that the governments of the region found themselves compelled to, because of the need to lock down and need to level the pandemic infection rate, is actually to provide assistance, to provide social protection to the societies, to the SMEs, and especially to the informal segment of the population who depend on the informal economic activity. And resources obviously are limited, and therefore there was an urgent need for these countries or these governments to reform. And we saw this in the case of Jordan, where with the help of the World Food Program, they implemented one of the most exemplary cash transfers in the region. Egypt has also moved very aggressively to enhance and to mainstream its cash transfer program. So I think this is a very important positive implication in the midst of this adversity from the COVID-19, is to actually to push governments to rethink the social contract and to promote the agenda of G2P, from government to people. In order to be able to effectively deliver the services and the support in terms of the social protection, governments also have started to think also seriously about enhancing their capacity in terms of the digital platforms and including in this case, of course, the entire service the value chain of the social services. For example, governments now found themselves, they have to inform the population about the programs. They have to identify the population, the people that will be the beneficiary of this program. They have to provide them with identification so that they can actually be uniquely identified. And then, of course, to screen and to screen the population that are eligible for support. And then, of course, to provide payments. And then to follow up in terms of the nature of the effectiveness of the program and complaints about the programs and so on. So this created some sort of a platform of knowledge and data. And this platform of knowledge and data requires digital identification. It requires mobile instruments, such as, for example, mobile telephone and internet and so on. And then, of course, financial transfers. So these ecosystem, I think is received some considerable support as a result of the pandemic. And I think countries will find themselves that in order to allocate resources, and in order to move on this direction, they have to start thinking deeply about the social contract itself with the government, with the subjects, so to speak, or with the population. And I think this is one of the most important, perhaps, ramifications of the COVID-19. In terms of the, going forward about what will be the next steps that needs to be taken, I think the MENA countries or the MENA governments need to enhance their regulatory capacity. Okay. So let me just conclude. I will say that they need to enhance their regulatory capacity in order to ensure equity. We know a lot about the gender gap, for example, in terms of the access to mobile and to internet and so on. And they also need to enhance the capacity to use big data in order to bridge the information gap vis-a-vis the access of SMEs to finance. And I think there are lots of examples, including, for example, from a country like Kenya, where companies now are to bridge the financing gap. So I think I exceeded my time, so let me just thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Your Excellency. Ask very kindly those who did not mute their microphones to do so, please, so that we can avoid the background noise. Thank you very much. Thank you again, Your Excellency, for this edifying presentation. We are all facing the same problems that you have mentioned with respect to the subsidy reform in particular, and with the need, which quite frankly became obvious today, that those countries that have already worked hard on improving their digital financial inclusion were able to face off to this pandemic in a much better way than those countries that did not have that. So there is a realization today that this is becoming a very important issue that we need to work on. All right, now may I ask Rima Ayedi to take the floor. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Jalloul, for moderating this session. And I would like to thank MED for inviting me for this very important webinar, and also very timely. So I will try to keep my introduction into the topic of this panel, which is the role of financial inclusion. But I would like to introduce what we call, because we have worked on this topic already, what we call the digital financial inclusion. We have adopted a definition which is pretty much making formal financial services accessible, affordable to all segments of the economy, with no exception, also through utilizing digital and traditional means. So this is when I talk about digital financial inclusion in the remaining of my comments. We also thought that digital financial inclusion should be, in fact, the next step of what financial inclusion meant, in fact, because financial inclusion is really access, affordability, use of financial services in the economy by everybody. And I think moving financial inclusion from a traditional sense of the term to digital can be a pillar of resilience to respond to exogenous shocks like the ones we've seen within the COVID-19 pandemic and subsequent crises that we've seen. So basically, what I would like to go with you is some ideas, but also some recommendations to move into this new concept and how to deal with it, obviously, from a regulatory point of view, and also to assess whether our countries in Mediterranean and Africa are ready for this jump, in fact, into the digital adventure. So my comments are based on the research we have done within EMEA and IMNES during the past months within our COVID-19 policy research initiative. But let me tell you before I go forward is what we recommend. It's really prompt actions to reach the unbanked via digital financial services in order to help channel those social, I would say, instruments from the government that Ibrahim has explained to the vulnerable groups, which are really living very hardship conditions nowadays during the pandemic. So what I will deal with now, it's really what are the obstacles we've seen during the global pandemic. And in fact, the containment measures taken by many countries were essential, okay, to achieving a reduction of this transmission of the virus and mortality rates. I think this has been clearly there. But at the same time, it has imposed heavy burdens on households, MSMEs, informal sector, due to business closures and so on, and layoffs and salary cuts, and really minimum income and employment income, which is needed during this period of time. Now, we heard very well the role of governments from Ibrahim, who have really been acting as the ultimate shock absorber within to implement certain policies and transfer mechanisms, which were really very important to support the small and medium-sized enterprises and micro companies and the vulnerable groups during this pandemic. And this is extremely important because those policies included social measures, disbursement, cash assistance to most vulnerable, monetary measures, lowering reserve requirements, interest rate cuts, funding facilities, and also using the guarantee schemes to finance MSMEs' operational cost over time. And this has been really unprecedented over the last months of the pandemic. However, the effectiveness of and reach of such policies are also conditional to the ability of these groups to access financial services. And this, unfortunately, was not the case. So making financial inclusion as an essential pillar of resilience to absorb the shock is important, but not the way we knew it before. We need to go digital. And digital means investment in digital infrastructure. And this is not done in all the countries, unfortunately. I mean, if we look at our countries, electronic payments, for example, it's not generalized in all our countries. And I think this is one aspect that needs to be very quickly accelerated to have what we call the e-wallets. I mean, money that can really go fast within our mobile phones and so on. I think we can take the case of M-Pesa. M-Pesa has pushed very much the level of financial inclusion very far in Africa, and it is really could be replicated over time. Now, the question is, what should we do? Well, first of all, what is the situation of our countries? And I think the first speaker has already mentioned some aspects there, and I think the World Bank Group, it's really has been very well placed to push this financial inclusion forward, but also there is the G20 commitment in financial inclusion as well, and those commitments and efforts have really resulted in huge improvement in financial inclusion trends over the years. Now, data is available to know what are the obstacles for financial inclusion over time, but we can still see a clear gap in gender and income groups within our countries. Now, I can say that Africa and South and East Mediterranean paint quite a mixed picture in terms of financial inclusion, the traditional way of the term, okay, not the digital way of the term. But I must say, if we include the digital way of the term, then Africa is quite advanced as compared to MENA region. But then I think it is also important to build on experiences that have worked and understand them a bit more. Again, I go back to M-Pesa in Kenya, which was launched in 2007. And I think if we look how the financial inclusion have evolved since then, it has been huge. So this had really a clear impact in the country, and it should be taken into consideration now. In the South Mediterranean, less than 50% of the adults report having a type of an account. Mobile money usage is very limited and cash use is very high. We need to move from cash. And this is something which in reality, COVID has brought to us because in fact, there are some research showing that in the cash, there is a transmission of the virus. So this also made the possibility of having less use of cash possible. Now, again, I want to put a focus on financial literacy. Financial literacy is key because it's a determinant also to enhance financial inclusion. And this financial literacy is low in our region. Of course, if I focus on the small and medium-sized enterprises, majority of small, medium-sized and small enterprises, they do not have access to loans in these countries too. And if they have access, it's very expensive. So you need to have some sort of subsidized loans to allow them really to continue operation, particularly in hardship situations like the ones of COVID. Now, we can think of how can digital financial inclusion enhance the reachability for the vulnerable population hit by the pandemic, and also the MSMEs and small and medium-sized enterprises over time. And here, I'm not going to go into all the research we have done because I don't have the time, but what I want to share with you are key aspects to consider in the discussion. And these are recommendations that we can discuss on how to enhance digital financial inclusion. So I have 8, if you bear with me, please. First one is to facilitate the individual and MSMEs access to banking and financial services, enabling them, for example, to facilitate the opening of a bank account online with key information requirements, which could be authenticated, signed online, and without need to visit the bank branch, particularly when you are in a containment situation. This new process must be underpinned within what we call a more flexible know your customer process requirement, which takes into account also the anti-money laundering and terrorist financing rules, which are applicable worldwide. Because nowadays, we also need to ensure that this trade-off between enhancing access to finance and stability and integrity aspects are there. Now, in countries, still, you need several documents, you need to go there face-to-face, and to be included in the financial system. And this is nowadays, we need to move from this specific traditional way of doing things. A second recommendation is to promote the greater use of mobile digital wallets. Most importantly, you see, and I think government has a role on it to work to why digitizing social payments. Digitizing social payment, I think Brahim mentioned this. You have an identification, so you have an identification number. So the next step is to digitize those social payments. This also will enhance the trust in those type of payments and encourage small companies, and sometimes also the informal economy, to formalize itself through this very simple process. So the third point is to reach out the small and medium-sized enterprises that lack access to finance through low-cost mechanisms or instruments to benefit from government supports. I think this can be done, for example, and it has been done, and I think we can debate it later on, it's the role of guarantee schemes. And then trying also, if we go online with some sort of guarantee schemes that does not link, to collateral requirements, so then, it reduces in certain way the cost of financing of small and medium-sized enterprise. So move from the old traditional way of doing guarantees into a more, I would say, digital type of guarantees over, with, of course, all the requirements that are needed there. Now, the fourth point is to provide more liquidity. I don't know if this has been done or not. I think we have an expert of microfinance organization that can share with us this information to provide liquidity support to those institutions, to help those very small companies to dive into this crisis and ensure that they are those small institutions and companies and micro institutions are not dying in this in this pandemic and in this recession. Fifth point is to increase digital awareness and enhance financial literacy. So I call it digital financial literacy. It's not something that is, of course, it's possible to learn by itself, but I think central banks, they have to take, to spearhead this dynamic and ensure that, the citizens are having a minimum level of digital financial literacy to encourage them into the application of mobile and digital financial services. Of course, specific attention has to be put on the elderly and also the youth and the others who have other difficulties and the disabled and so on and so forth. Number 6, it's also to have, because in our region, we have an issue with gender aspects, and it's important to have a specific gender perspective in designing any financial support policies. So women, I would say, encouraged to dive into this crisis, because in fact, we've seen clearly in all the international organizations, women have been really very much affected by this pandemic. 7th point is to focus on financial inclusion channels in rural and marginalized urban areas through specific targeted enhancements for digital and internet connectivity. I think this is also an important aspect to think about the rural areas. So this is within the whole thinking of the SDGs and the inclusions of other areas which are not being touched by those aspects. And 8th point, it's really, and I think this is extremely important, I repeat it, is to ensure that all the international rules are complied with, specifically the AML CFT and other security issues, because nowadays within the digital financial industry, which we call fintech, whatever, there are many aspects and many cybercrime and other cyber risks. So we need to move into a clear policy for consumer protection that deals and addresses these matters. Thank you very much, Jalul. I hope it was not too long.
No, thank you, Riem. It was very, very, very interesting. I think you covered all of the aspects. And the problem to access to finance is a very, very, very serious issue. And so thank you for having focused on that particular point. And on sharing with us all the 8 recommendations, I think we've learned a lot. Thank you very much. Alors, Esma, tu souhaites parler en anglais ou en français? Tu unmute, please. Unmute, Esma.
Oui, voilà, c'est bon.
Voilà.
Excusez-moi. Non, je vais parler en français. Je pense que je serai plus à l'aise.
Sois à l'aise.
Comme je suis la seule qui représente le terrain, donc je vais essayer d'éviter les chiffres, peut-être que tout le monde les connaît, et je vais essayer de donner l'exemple de Enda et de la Tunisie pour montrer l'impact de la pandémie sur la microfinance. Je n'ai pas besoin de rappeler que la crise n'est pas que sanitaire pour les pauvres, mais elle est surtout économique et sociale, et elle a frappé de plein fouet les entreprises petites, micro et petites entreprises, comme on les appelle en Tunisie, qui comptent à peu près en Tunisie autour de 770 000 entreprises. 97% sont des entreprises qui emploient à peu près 1 million de personnes, donc ce n'est pas une petite chose. Mais elle a frappé surtout les populations vulnérables et précaires du secteur informel, ce qu'on appelle nous les AGR, les activités génératrices de revenus, qui sont de toute façon peu résilientes et qui risquent malheureusement, si la crise continue, de disparaître. Donc, je donne quand même le rappel des études du PNUD qui ont montré que la crise pourrait malheureusement appauvrir encore quelques 500 000 Tunisiens, quelques 500 000 individus et malheureusement surtout des femmes, et donc ça va accentuer la féminisation de la pauvreté. Ils disent aussi que le chômage qui a augmenté, il arrive à 21%, créerait 300 000 nouveaux chômeurs sur le marché du travail. Et je donne ces chiffres pour montrer l'importance de la microfinance. Tout à l'heure, Philippe De Fontaine avait bien dit qu'on ne va pas trouver de travail facilement pour tous ces jeunes qui vont venir sur le marché du travail, d'où l'importance de la microfinance. Donc, je donne le cas de Enda, qui a aujourd'hui quelques 400 000 clients actifs depuis le temps qu'on travaille en Tunisie, donc depuis 25 ans. Nous sommes l'institution de microfinance pionnière et leader sur le marché. Et nous touchons, donc, comme j'ai dit, nous avons touché 900 000, mais aujourd'hui, nous avons 400 000 clients actifs, c'est-à-dire un ménage sur 7, ou encore, si on compte le ménage, ça nous fait à peu près, si on compte 4 par ménage ou 3, ça nous fait quelques 1,5 million de Tunisiens qui sont touchés par Enda, par la microfinance et l'offre de services de Enda. Donc, à la suite de la crise, on a sondé à peu près toute notre communauté pour voir un peu l'impact sur eux. Donc, je ne vais pas donner les chiffres du premier confinement, mais je vais parler du deuxième confinement, donc le confinement total. Nous avons à peu près 10% des clients qui déclarent avoir définitivement fermé leur projet. 44% déclarent que leurs revenus ont baissé de 50% au plus. Donc, je donne que les chiffres qui sont vraiment importants. Et je n'ai pas besoin de rappeler aussi les secteurs touchés, le secteur du tourisme, l'artisanat, le transport, la restauration. Donc, vous savez qu'en Tunisie, malheureusement, nous avons beaucoup de cafés et ces cafés font vivre beaucoup de gens et ils sont parmi les clients de la microfinance. Et avec le confinement, ces cafés étaient obligés soit de fermer plus tôt et donc sont frappés par la crise. Alors, qu'est-ce que nous avons fait à Enda? Nous avons pris quand même pas mal de mesures pour pouvoir… je vais d'abord aussi donner l'impact sur l'institution elle-même, parce que malheureusement, apparemment, il n'y a pas eu d'études sur l'impact de la pandémie sur le secteur de la microfinance en Tunisie. Donc, je n'ai pas d'écho pour nos confrères des autres institutions, mais Enda a été touché comme toutes les institutions de microfinance. Et je dis pourquoi. Même pendant la révolution de 2011, Enda n'a pas fermé ses portes. C'est très important. Une institution de microfinance ne devrait pas fermer ses portes à ses clients. Nous avions à l'époque fermé un seul jour et ensuite nous avons repris. Là, l'État nous a obligés, je pense que c'est une erreur, nous a obligés à fermer pendant un mois et je pense que c'était catastrophique pour les clients et pour l'institution. Donc, en plus, les IMF ne sont pas, comme l'avait dit Rim tout à l'heure, malheureusement, le digital n'est pas encore généralisé, donc nous ne sommes pas adaptés au travail à distance. Et je pense que dans la microfinance, on ne peut pas tout simplement travailler à distance. Le contact humain est primordial et très important. Sur le plan de l'institution, donc bien sûr, on a fait face à des risques, les risques financiers, les risques le portefeuille à risque. Donc c'est la première fois aussi, la deuxième fois, excusez-moi. Donc comme la révolution, le portefeuille à risque a doublé. On fait face à un manque de liquidité. Tout le monde en a parlé, surtout parce que nous étions obligés par le ministère des Finances de restructurer et de décaler pour les clients. Donc, on a restructuré tout notre portefeuille en quelque sorte. Et en plus, les clients ont besoin de plus d'argent. Donc, ils demandent aujourd'hui plus. Donc, le prêt moyen a augmenté. Donc, nous avons besoin de plus de liquidité. Or, on a plus de problèmes à trouver de la liquidité auprès des banques. Là, je fais une toute petite parenthèse pour dire tout à l'heure, Rim, je pense, se demander est-ce qu'on a eu des privilèges, des avantages? Je le dis en passant sans rancune, bien sûr, qu'au contraire, nous avons relevé que l'État avait besoin de nous et nous demandait d'appuyer, de faire plus et de faire plus de sacrifices en tant qu'institution de microfinance que pour nous aider ou nous apporter quelques avantages, notamment au niveau de la fiscalité. De même pour les bailleurs internationaux et pour nos financiers, nos institutions financières, malheureusement, nous n'avons pas eu non plus ni de décalage, ni de réduction de taux d'intérêt, rien. Donc, on a dû se débrouiller par nous-mêmes pour pouvoir s'en sortir. Et je pense que s'il y a une clé, c'est le personnel. C'est quand vous avez un personnel qui est engagé et qui est rempli de la mission sociale, vous pouvez compter sur ce personnel pour être aux côtés des clients et pour sauver l'institution. Au niveau du recrutement, bien sûr, comme toutes les sociétés, nous avons gelé le recrutement, mais nous n'avons pas réduit notre personnel. Au contraire, nous comptons en 2021 reprendre le recrutement, ouvrir d'autres agences et servir plus de personnes. Là, vous pouvez voir que malheureusement, quand il y a une crise de ce genre, il y a plus de demandes pour la microfinance et donc nous devons être prêts à augmenter notre production et à servir plus de monde. Donc notre approche, on a adopté une approche inclusive, systémique et surtout centrée sur le client. Donc nous étions obligés, ça nous a pris beaucoup d'efforts de nous concentrer sur les clients un par un, surtout tous ceux qui ont été touchés. Donc, je donne rapidement quelques méthodes de révision, de méthodes de validation, les réductions des délais d'attente, l'augmentation du prêt moyen, le rééchelonnement des prêts, ajouter des périodes de grâce qui n'étaient pas dans le programme, refinancer quelques projets, octroyer des prêts complémentaires, faire des décalages de 3 à 6 mois avec une gratuité pour les populations vulnérables et accorder des prêts solidaires au profit des ménages. Donc, nous avions touché 275 000 prêts ont été décalés avec une enveloppe de 800 millions de dinars qui sont contribués par l'IMF. En plus de cela, je raconte aussi ce que peut faire une IMF avec l'ONG ENDA, parce qu'aujourd'hui, nous sommes 2 institutions. Il y a l'institution de microfinance ENDA Tamwil et l'ONG ENDA Interarabe qui accordent les services non financiers. Nous avons mis en place avec des bénévoles un programme de collecte de dons financiers en nature pour des familles très démunies pendant le confinement et surtout pendant le ramadan. Nous avons mis en place une cellule d'écoute et d'orientation et d'assistance psychologique aux clients et à leur ménage, parce qu'on oublie l'impact psychologique de la crise sur les gens très, très pauvres. Nous avons mis en place aussi un soutien juridique, fiscal, social et comptable afin de faire bénéficier les clients des exemptions et avantages mis à leur disposition par le gouvernement. Malheureusement, je pense qu'ils n'en ont pas profité beaucoup, mais c'est déjà ça d'important. Par contre, comme l'avait dit Rim tout à l'heure, nous, ça fait 10 ans qu'on parle de digital. Nous avons essayé d'approcher tous les gouvernements, toutes les banques centrales, tous les gouverneurs de banques centrales. Nous n'avons pas beaucoup réussi. Malheureusement, avec l'arrivée de la pandémie, on s'est trouvé pris au dépourvu parce que la culture digitale, elle n'est pas très développée en Tunisie. On ne peut pas se cacher de cela. Donc, nous avons essayé quand même de faire avec ce qu'on a parce que nous avons déjà entamé, il y a très longtemps, le lancement d'agents de proximité. Donc, nous avons mis en place quelques 200 agents de proximité pour que les clients puissent rembourser leurs prêts auprès de l'agent et pas venir jusqu'à l'agence et perdre le temps. Nous sommes en train aujourd'hui de digitaliser le parcours agent de crédit pour faire plus vite et plus rapidement. Mais j'attire l'attention que la digitalisation ne réussira en Tunisie que quand on trouvera une solution à la qualité de la connexion. C'est très important. Nous avons de graves problèmes de connexion et de lourdeur de notre système d'information, surtout dans les régions. Donc là, c'est quelque chose qui ne dépend pas de l'IMF, mais qui dépend de l'État et qui sera dans nos recommandations. Rim a aussi parlé de l'éducation financière. Effectivement, nous, on l'a fait depuis très longtemps, mais nous avons réalisé l'importance aujourd'hui de généraliser l'éducation financière et nous comptons beaucoup sur la Banque centrale pour la généraliser ou imposer quelque part l'éducation financière. Je dirais aussi ce que nous, l'ONG, on a essayé de faire. On avait invité des jeunes start-upers pour trouver des solutions innovantes pour aider les micro-entreprises en difficulté. Et vraiment, ça fait grand plaisir de voir cette solidarité entre les Tunisiens, entre les jeunes et les moins jeunes, entre les jeunes qui ont la technologie entre les mains et surtout les producteurs agricoles. Nous avons mis en place ensemble dans un hôtel, vous allez me dire Covid, bon, les producteurs agricoles et les jeunes qui ont des solutions technologiques. Et c'était fantastique parce qu'ils sont prêts à leur faire des plateformes de vente, de commercialisation de leurs produits, parce que c'est le gros goulot d'étranglement aujourd'hui. Nous organisons des séries de hackathons, de ideation camps ou camps d'idéation. Le réseautage, c'est aussi des solutions très importantes entre les clients. Nous sommes en train de chercher un moyen pour mettre en réseau les 400 000 clients de Enda, parce qu'il y a beaucoup d'échanges, ils peuvent vraiment collaborer entre eux. Et bien sûr, nous continuons aujourd'hui à faire le coaching individualisé pour les clients. Nous avons appris grâce à cette crise que la microfinance toute seule n'est pas suffisante. Si vous donnez l'argent uniquement à un micro-entrepreneur, ce n'est pas suffisant. Surtout un petit entrepreneur jeune et qui commence et qui lance son entreprise, il a besoin d'accompagnement, il a besoin de formation. Et c'est ce que nous faisons, des formations de 2 semaines, 3 semaines, pour l'aider à mettre en place son plan d'affaires, à apprendre la fiscalité, à se prémunir contre les risques pour pouvoir obtenir son crédit et lancer son entreprise. Donc, si j'ai quelques recommandations et conclusions pour le gouvernement ou pour les autorités, c'est absolument accélérer la mise en œuvre du système de protection sociale universelle, c'est accélérer la mise en œuvre de la stratégie nationale d'inclusion financière qui existe, mettre en place les instruments de financement innovants, surtout pour les populations vulnérables, accélérer la mise en place des établissements de paiement tels que stipulés par la Banque centrale. Et heureusement, nous sommes très contents que la Banque centrale sorte cette nouvelle directive. Mais aujourd'hui, nous attendons bien sûr la mise en place. Enda aimerait beaucoup se lancer dans ce business parce que c'est important pour les 400 000 clients que nous avons. Mettre en place des lignes et des mécanismes de financement au profit des IMF. J'ai dit tout à l'heure que nous n'avons pas eu malheureusement ce genre de privilèges auprès du gouvernement. Mettre et développer les services de microassurance de proximité pour nos populations, pour les clients, pour améliorer leur résilience et la résilience financière des ménages. Permettre aux IMF la collecte de l'épargne. Nous découvrons de plus en plus qu'il est urgent de permettre la collecte de l'épargne parce que cela va nous aider à garantir la pérennité de nos ressources financières. Comme j'ai dit, l'argent devient de plus en plus rare, de plus en plus cher et malheureusement, si nous n'avons pas accès à des ressources financières, nous ne pouvons pas nous-mêmes financer les plus pauvres. Donc, faciliter l'accès au financement local et international en limitant l'exposition au risque. Vous savez tous qu'aujourd'hui, le risque de change coûte très, très cher pour les IMF. Promouvoir le financement participatif comme levier d'inclusion financière, surtout pour les toutes petites entreprises. Nous avons remarqué que 40 000 dinars, parce que c'est la loi en Tunisie, nous ne pourrons pas dépasser le montant de 40 000 dinars. 40 000 dinars n'est pas suffisant pour des startups, pour des jeunes qui veulent vraiment lancer leurs entreprises. Donc, c'est pour ça que nous recommandons d'avoir recours au financement participatif par le privé ou par les IMF elles-mêmes. Et en bref, repenser le modèle socio-économique pour une plus grande inclusion et un développement centré davantage sur l'humain. Pour nous, les IMF, parce que nous ne pouvons pas demander au gouvernement et nous, on ne fera rien, c'est accélérer l'accès à des services financiers digitaux, accessibles et adaptés. Et là, je répète encore une fois, nous sommes pleins d'enthousiasme, nous avons envie d'accélérer, mais nous avons besoin d'assistance technique. C'est pour ça que je veux ici remercier la SFI, la Banque mondiale et tous les bailleurs qui sont prêts à nous appuyer pour pouvoir le faire vite. Parce qu'effectivement, devenir comme M-Pesa ou suivre les modèles en Afrique subsaharienne, malheureusement pour nous, nous n'avons pas les compétences aujourd'hui pour pouvoir le faire. Donc, il faudrait absolument aussi réduire la fracture numérique auprès de notre population et former la population au digital. Accélérer aussi l'éducation financière tant qu'on peut le faire, accélérer et adosser l'accès au financement à l'accompagnement, un accompagnement adapté, promouvoir les ventes en ligne et le réseautage, comme je l'ai dit tout à l'heure, encourager les startups à trouver des solutions innovantes pour la commercialisation, parce que c'est très important, appuyer les groupements agricoles à améliorer la qualité de leurs produits pour pouvoir les vendre plus facilement. Et là, j'ouvre une parenthèse, la pandémie a un effet bénéfique sur l'agriculture. Il faut absolument que nous donnions plus de crédit aux agriculteurs parce qu'ils ne sont pas, heureusement, ils ne sont pas frappés par la pandémie et nous avons toujours besoin de manger. Donc, les petits agriculteurs ont surtout besoin aujourd'hui de crédit pour améliorer leur production et vendre plus leurs produits. Ensuite, renforcer le concept social, solidaire et équitable chez les consommateurs. Il est important de convaincre la population et les consommateurs tunisiens à acheter équitable et à acheter social, acheter pour pouvoir aider tous ces micro-entrepreneurs. Donc, comme je l'ai dit tout à l'heure, je finis par dire que nous sommes heureux d'avoir pu appuyer le gouvernement pendant cette crise de la pandémie Corona. On aurait souhaité quand même recevoir de l'appui du gouvernement. Je donne juste un petit exemple. Enda aujourd'hui paye quelque chose comme 10 à 12 millions de dinars en impôts. Moi, si j'étais le gouvernement, j'aurais dit à une IMF, gardez cet impôt, mais accordez-le à des populations très pauvres à un taux plus faible. Et on l'aurait fait avec grand plaisir. Je dis bien aussi qu'on compte sur la coopération internationale pour nous appuyer dans la digitalisation, l'accélération de la digitalisation. Voilà, merci.
Merci Esma. Excellente présentation. Tu sais, ça me fait de la peine, tu te rappelles, depuis 2011 qu'on parle de tous les projets qu'on devait mettre en place. Et ce que je regrette, quand j'ai vu le programme du gouvernement, justement, le programme que soi-disant ils ont mis en place pour venir en aide aux petites entreprises, aux entreprises et à la population, je n'ai pas vu le mot microfinance dans ce programme. Et donc, ce que tu dis là, c'est que vous avez aidé le gouvernement alors qu'il était question que le gouvernement vous aide. Et il peut vous aider de 3 manières très, très, très simples. Premièrement, mettre une ligne de refinancement en votre faveur pour que vous puissiez venir en aide justement à vos clients qui ont des difficultés. Je regrette quand même que 10% de vos clients ont dû fermer la porte et que 44% que vous pourriez sauver si seulement il y avait une ligne de refinancement. C'est le même problème qui existe depuis toujours. Et pour ce qui est des lignes de refinancement que les institutions étrangères mettent en place, j'ai toujours dit que la Banque centrale devrait intervenir et mettre en place une ligne de swap devise à moyen terme qui vous permettrait, parce que vous avez la possibilité de lever des fonds à l'extérieur, je le sais, mais que vous ne souhaitez pas le faire parce que vous allez perdre dans le change, quoi. Et
il serait souhaitable que tu reviennes au gouvernement, voilà.
Non, mais c'est incroyable. Mais la question qui revient là, je vais la poser dans un instant. But what I would like to inform you is that Mr. Haider El-Baghdadi, he's with us, he's listening to us, I'm sure intently, but he cannot participate, he cannot speak because apparently his organization does not allow him to use Zoom. So, well, welcome, Mr. Al-Baghdadi. We regret that we're not going to be listening to you. I'm sure you would have, your contribution would have been tremendous, because you also are very much involved in what we're talking about today. Donc, nous avons terminé les interventions. Nous avons 15 minutes pour des questions. Il y a une question qui revient. There's a question that keeps coming back. Why this gap of the digital penetration between, I would say, a lot of African countries? Reem mentioned Kenya, M-Pesa, it keeps coming back, but they are the best in the world, by the way, and not in our countries. Why? I mean, we have seen the result of that gap. We have seen it. We have seen long lines in front of the postal office at a time when people were supposed to observe the social distancing so that they'll get the cash transfers from the government. We have seen crowds, thousands of them, crowding out to get some food that the government was distributing. I mean, imagine if we had worked on that digital penetration, we would not have had that problem, and it would have been a lot easier to help, particularly the underserved population, the poor people, and it has been mentioned earlier by His Excellency Ibrahim Al-Badawi about the personal identifier. If we've had that, then we would have been in a position to make those cash transfers a lot easier, a lot more proficient, and very much prompt. So the question here that I would like to ask all of you, why is it, I think I would contribute in giving the answer. Why is it that we have such a gap? Why is it that we don't have in Tunisia today, or in Morocco, Algeria, a mobile payment system yet? I mean, there are some attempts that were still so nascent. The problem is that we don't have a single system that is being used today. And is it cultural? Is it the lobbying effect from the banks? I want to hear your views. Reem.
Yes, I mean, it's a very complex question. I mean, there are many factors which all play together to make that the level of penetration is very low, and maybe, I mean, it will remain low. One aspect is, first of all, the MENA region, it's the lowest in terms of financial development. So normally you need to have a minimum level to move into what we call digital financial services and so on. Second is there is a need to have support from the governmental institutions, like, for example, the central banks. I mean, I would like to ask you, Jalloul, why it's not possible to make electronic transfers and do e-payments easily, in Tunisia, I mean.
Well, there's been some attempts. The postal office launched a system called the D17, D17. We've been involved in that because I work in a technology group, and it works. But for whatever reason, okay, I mean, so technologically, the solution exists, okay? And there are other solutions as well. But the penetration is very poor. And what we've noticed personally, I would say it is a great resistance on the part of the bank. Esma can answer that question as well. Banks see microfinance and electronic payments, mobile payments, as a threat to them. They see it as a threat. And we have a very strong lobby, okay? And what I would have hoped personally is that the central bank would be neutral and would see the benefit to the society and will convince the banks that it's about time for us in Tunisia. And the same situation goes in Morocco. I mean, I was working in a bank in Morocco. The banking lobby is very, very strong. And they seem to have convinced the central bank so far that they're not happy with that. You see, there are three systems in mobile payments. There is a system which is totally controlled by the telecom operator. There is a system which is totally controlled by the banks, and there is the hybrid system where the telephone operator work with the banks together to set up a mobile system. In Tunisia, we're still looking for the right one. Many attempts, but so far, as I said, technically they work, but no penetration because there is no program that's that intends with the support of the government and with the support of the central bank, where they basically say we're going to do it and we're going to choose one system, and we will put a program in place where we will, for example, start paying all the employees of the government or the civil servants. We have 850,000 of them. They're going to get their salaries on their phone. It's very simple. That's how it started in China with the Red Pack or whatever it is. But there is no, il n'y a pas de volonté, I think. It's a very sad situation. And we've seen the results of that, as I said earlier. There is another reason, and Asma will agree with me, I think. There's another lobby. The lobby which is, that favors cash transactions. Cash transactions. I'm not going to go into details. I think Asma understands perfectly what I'm saying. Okay, there are people in Tunisia, very highly placed. They hold what we call de facto power, and they're not very happy to see this move towards electronic payments, because if you take away the cash from them, then they're going to lose a huge business that they have today. I think. Je ne sais pas ce que tu en penses, Asma.
Oui, effectivement, moi je confirme parce que, comme j'ai dit tout à l'heure, nous sommes en train d'expérimenter depuis 10 ans et la réponse, elle est très claire, c'est le politique. Si nos politiciens ne sont pas convaincus, on n'avancera pas. Et je veux quand même saluer le gouverneur de la Banque centrale d'aujourd'hui parce que lui, il est ouvert, il a vu que ça marche dans d'autres pays, il a permis à ce que la loi change et à ce qu'on mette en place les établissements de paiement. Là aussi, la coopération internationale est en train d'appuyer la Banque centrale pour avancer. Mais effectivement, comme tu l'avais bien dit, il y a la pression des banques, la pression du trabendo, si on veut, et des trabendistes qui n'aimeraient pas le recours au digital. Et tu l'avais si bien dit, si on veut changer les mentalités, il faut qu'on commence tous à payer nos salariés à travers le mobile. C'est ce que j'ai vu au Kenya il y a 15 ans pratiquement.
15 ans, exactement.
Et je n'arrête pas de le dire malheureusement. Donc, il y a un autre quand même obstacle. N'oubliez pas qu'il faut quand même éduquer la population. Mais j'ai une très bonne nouvelle à vous donner. C'est que nous, cela fait, comme j'ai dit, 10 ans qu'on teste, qu'on essaye. Nous avons des résultats, de très bons résultats. Les femmes analphabètes peuvent payer avec le téléphone. Si elles ne peuvent pas, elles, le faire, elles demandent à leurs enfants et elles sont très contentes et elles sont convaincues parce que cela leur évite de perdre leur temps dans les agences parce qu'elles peuvent attendre beaucoup d'heures ou bien de venir de très loin des zones rurales pour pouvoir rembourser leurs prêts. Donc aujourd'hui, nous n'avons plus de doute sur la satisfaction des clients. Les pauvres sont digitalisables, si on veut cette expression. Ils ont juste besoin qu'on les aide, qu'on leur montre, et d'où la nécessité de l'éducation financière. On l'appelle aujourd'hui éducation digitale aussi. Nous sommes en train de leur montrer sur leur téléphone comment envoyer, rembourser, comment payer leurs factures de téléphone ou d'électricité. Tu avais si bien dit que la Poste, elle a une solution qui est très bien, que je trouve très bien. Et on peut même payer la nafra, entre parenthèses, la pension alimentaire pour les divorcés. Donc franchement, nous avons tout ce qu'il faut. Il reste la volonté et il reste l'éducation financière. Il faudrait que le chef du gouvernement ou le président sorte à la télévision et commence à faire la publicité pour le paiement digital, tout simplement, parce que tu as oublié une chose importante, c'est la sécurité. Nous avons vu dans le passé des femmes, de pauvres femmes, se faire voler leur argent quand elles sortent de l'agence. Donc, on a tout. Et la Banque centrale, elle le sait, elle veut éviter le cash. Ça, c'est clair. Donc, aujourd'hui, c'est leur politique. Mais je crois qu'ils ont encore un peu de bureaucratie pour pouvoir pousser les dossiers et avancer rapidement sur ce secteur. Moi, je crois qu'il nous faudra encore 5 ans à 10 ans, malheureusement, pour devenir comme le Kenya ou comme l'Afrique subsaharienne. Je suis très pessimiste.
On ne l'espère pas. À propos d'éducation financière qui a été mentionnée par Rine tout à l'heure, vous savez que la Banque centrale du Maroc, Bank el-Maghreb, a lancé ça il y a déjà 7 ans. J'ai même participé personnellement à une conférence sur l'éducation financière et c'est la Banque centrale qui a pris donc l'initiative entre les mains et qui a vraiment lancé ça avec beaucoup de succès. Donc, parce que tu as mentionné le gouvernement, je pense que la Banque centrale a aussi un rôle à jouer. Un autre point qui est très important que tu as mentionné, Esma, c'est l'accompagnement. C'est tellement vrai. C'est tellement vrai. Et d'ailleurs, ce qui s'applique pour la microfinance, pour les microcrédits, s'applique pour les banques aussi. On accorde des crédits, mais on n'accompagne pas le client. Et puis, on se pose des questions après pourquoi est-ce que le client a des problèmes. Donc, je suis content de voir que vous avez commencé. Ça demande des ressources quand même. Ça demande des ressources, ça demande une expertise. Ça ne paye pas parce que les clients ne vont pas payer pour les services de conseil et d'accompagnement. Donc, c'est un effort que vous devez prendre sur vos épaules, quoi, en quelque sorte. Mais c'est tellement important. Là encore, c'est l'État qui doit vous aider, peut-être avec une fiscalité un peu plus gentille, pour vous dire, écoutez, on souhaite que vous accompagniez le client. De toutes les manières, je suis tellement convaincu de cela que ça peut changer la donne. Hein.
En fait, aujourd'hui, on ne peut pas accompagner plus que 20 000. Tu vois, sur les 400 000, on a réussi à accompagner 20 000. C'est vrai.
C'est très bien.
Mais ce n'est pas très grave et on manque d'expertise. On a vraiment besoin, si jamais vous savez autour de vous, c'est des pays qui ont réussi dans l'accompagnement des micro-entrepreneurs et des TPE, des toutes petites entreprises. On sera très contents de la recevoir.
Voilà. Fatima Zahra a envoyé une petite note pour dire qu'elle était ravie de participer et qu'elle représente la Fondation marocaine pour l'éducation financière, que je viens de citer, qui a été créée par la Banque centrale. Et donc, elle est active dans ce domaine. Donc, vous voyez un peu le retard qu'on a pris. Donc, il y a un peu de coordination et de synergie qu'il faut créer entre les pays, puisqu'on parle de toute la Méditerranée. Lim a mentionné tout à l'heure le fait qu'il faut que nous puissions apprendre des pays qui nous ont avancé. C'est très vrai. Mais des fois, c'est très simple. Envoyer une petite délégation au Kenya pour voir ce que les Kenyans font et l'impact que ça a eu sur l'agriculture, sur le développement, sur tout, sur la croissance économique. D'ailleurs, il y a une note qui a été préparée par MED que j'ai vue et qui montre l'impact que l'inclusion financière a sur le développement économique et sur la croissance économique, dont on ne parle pas beaucoup, mais j'y crois. Bon, est-ce qu'il y a d'autres points ou d'autres questions? Are there any other questions? Because it's 5:45.
Mr. Chairman.
Yes, Ibrahim.
I would like to, if I may, say something about this kind of peculiar phenomena that middle-income countries like Tunisia and Morocco will be far behind, especially much lower income or slightly lower income groups, Saharan Africa. I have a thesis here, but it's going to be corrected. I think it boils down to the extent of the governments in the Maghreb countries, in Tunisia and Morocco, and I don't know, maybe not Algeria, but depend on the banking sector to finance expenditure outlays. And I think to the extent that the preference in these countries is to maintain a strong currency, or a currency that is fairly, almost like a de facto effect to the euro, which is also very similar to the situation in Lebanon, you will find that there is some sort of an alliance between the public sector, between the financial public sector, central banks and the Ministry of Finance on one hand, and the banking sector on the other. And perhaps maybe that is one area where it's actually can explain the strengths of the banking lobby and also the dependence of the Ministry of Finance on the banking sector. So it can actually be related to the approach to the macroeconomy, because in countries where the exchange rate is flexible, the exchange rate takes the role of a shock absorber, and therefore it actually lessens the pressure on the fiscal policy. Perhaps maybe this is one of the reasons why the banking sector is so strong, banking law.
I agree with you, Excellency. Any other questions? Any other observations, remarks? Roger? He's gone.
No, I'm not gone. I'm here.
I was testing you.
I was listening to you very carefully, and it was a very good debate and very good presentation. So please, Jalul, I think you can go ahead and close the meeting.
All right. Well, thank you again very, very much.
I think Esma wants to speak.
Yeah. Non, c'est juste une reconnaissance en public. Je voudrais vraiment te remercier et remercier Philippe De Fontaine vive pour l'appui que vous apportez au secteur de la microfinance, là où vous êtes et que vous avez apporté à ANDA en particulier. C'est tout. Merci beaucoup.
Oui, merci.
Champion.
Donc, tu vois, Philippe, après ton départ, des années après, on continue à te remercier. Tu as laissé des traces partout.
Oui, mais tu as donné les deux clés locales et internationales pour le refinancement des IMF. Et donc, ça, c'est les conclusions que nous partageons. Et je peux ajouter une chose. Je pense que dans la conférence que vous allez organiser en 2021, pour faire suite à plusieurs remarques, notamment de ESMA, je me demande si nous ne pourrions pas proposer une sorte de service civique qui se met en place dans tous les pays où on prend les étudiants, justement l'éducation technologique, voire financière intéressante, pour être mis à disposition des IMF pour faciliter leur éducation. Mais on en parlera en 2021. Je pense qu'il faut donner de l'emploi à ces jeunes. C'est un vrai problème social majeur.
Tu as 1000 fois raison, mais tu sais, Philippe, il faut faire ça. Mais si tu poses la question à ESMA, quelle est aujourd'hui la demande, c'est-à-dire quel est le marché potentiel des microcrédits en Tunisie, elle te dira c'est à peu près 1,4 million. Tu me corriges, ESMA, c'est bien ça?
Il y a plus aujourd'hui, il y aurait au moins 2 millions.
Ah, donc ça a augmenté.
Au moins.
Alors, imaginez, Philippe, imagine que, donc ça c'est une politique simple qui ne va pas demander beaucoup d'argent, hein. C'est pas des investissements en infrastructure, c'est pas. Donc, imagine ce qu'on peut faire si on arrive à satisfaire les 2 millions, ok, avec l'expertise de ESMA et d'autres IMF en Tunisie, mais surtout ESMA, elle a été pionnière, c'est pour ça que je l'appelle la mère de la microfinance, même si elle est encore jeune, hein. Alors, imagine l'impact que ceci va avoir du point de vue social, ok? Parce que ça a été dit tout à l'heure par Philippe Belhaj, il a 1000 fois raison. Aujourd'hui, le marché du travail va connaître des transformations absolument extraordinaires, pas seulement parce qu'il n'y a pas de croissance, mais aussi à cause de l'industrie 4.0, du phénomène de reshoring. Les boîtes multinationales ne vont pas rester toujours ici si on ne leur offre pas autre chose, etc., etc., etc. Alors, imagine qu'on se dit, demain, nous allons vraiment mettre l'accent sur une économie sociale et solidaire. Nous avons les preuves, nous avons l'expérience, nous avons l'expertise, nous avons les études empiriques, nous avons tout ce qu'il faut pour lancer vraiment un programme extrêmement ambitieux pour dire notre objectif, c'est de couvrir les 2 millions. Imagine ce que ceci va avoir en termes d'emploi, en termes, c'est-à-dire d'impact social. Et par conséquent, qui offre une ligne de vie à ces jeunes, n'est-ce pas? Ce que ceci va avoir en termes de croissance, parce qu'ils vont travailler, ils vont produire, n'est-ce pas? De tous les points de vue. Okay? Alors, quand je vois qu'en Tunisie, c'est moins le cas au Maroc, beaucoup moins le cas au Maroc, qui a fait des progrès absolument extraordinaires comparé à la Tunisie, la microfinance en Tunisie est toujours le parent pauvre du système financier. Je l'ai dit quand j'étais ministre des Finances en 2011, je le répète, la microfinance n'est pas un segment à part, ce n'est pas du social. La microfinance doit faire partie du système financier et une partie importante du système financier. Pourquoi est-ce que ce message a tellement de difficultés à passer et que les gens continuent à estimer que la microfinance, c'est du social? Ce n'est pas la peine que je vous donne des anecdotes, j'en ai plein. Des discussions que j'ai eues avec des gouverneurs de la Banque centrale, avant, pas celui-là. Et je suis allé voir le gouverneur de la Banque centrale du Maroc, qui est un ami après tout, Philippe Joueri, il y a 6 ans ou 7 ans, une année après que j'ai quitté le ministère des Finances, et il sait la passion que j'ai pour la microfinance. Il m'a dit, Jaloul, je vais t'annoncer une nouvelle, je sais que ça va te faire plaisir. Je lui ai dit, ah bon, j'aime bien les bonnes nouvelles. Il m'a dit, c'est la Banque centrale qui va prendre la supervision de la microfinance, du microcrédit au Maroc. Voilà, c'est toute la différence. Aujourd'hui, entre-temps, nous avons créé une agence de supervision de la microfinance, mais elle reste en dehors du système financier, complètement. Et ESMA souffre le martyre parce qu'elle a des opportunités, mais elle n'a pas de ligne de refinancement. Elle n'a pas de ligne de refinancement. Qu'est-ce que cela coûterait au gouvernement de mettre l'accent sur ça et de lui faciliter, peut-être en accordant, s'il le faut, une garantie étatique aux banques pour que les banques accordent des lignes de refinancement à ESMA, pour qu'elle fasse son travail. ESMA, c'est bien ça, non? ESMA.
Oui, bien sûr. Heureusement qu'il y a, les banques commencent à croire en nous et à la limite, aujourd'hui, elles nous financent. Donc, tu as dit tout à l'heure, elles ont peur de nous, mais en fait, elles profitent beaucoup de nous aussi parce qu'elles nous refinancent et à des taux pas gentils. Hein. Donc, là où tu parles, toi, d'une ligne du gouvernement, c'est un taux subventionné pour pouvoir surtout réduire nos taux d'intérêt pour les plus pauvres. Et ça, c'est mon rêve. Et je pense que la seule solution, c'est l'épargne. Et là, les banques, c'est impossible. Ils ne vont jamais nous donner cette possibilité. Et malheureusement, tant que la microfinance n'est pas sous la supervision de la Banque centrale, on n'aura pas ce rêve de mon vivant. Je n'y crois pas.
Est-ce que tu aurais accepté que la Banque centrale ou que les autorités tunisiennes te donnent la possibilité de collecter l'épargne en milieu rural seulement?
Ah oui, ce serait formidable. C'est-à-dire, bien sûr, moi, je ne dis pas que nous sommes experts déjà, parce qu'on doit apprendre. Il faudrait justement qu'ils nous préparent, qu'ils nous disent 2022, 2023, on va vous accorder cette possibilité, préparez-vous. Et on apprendra, parce qu'attention, les pays comme les nôtres, nous n'avons pas l'expérience de collecter l'épargne. Donc, moi, je crois que oui. En tous les cas, je peux vous dire qu'on a fait des études qui ont montré que les populations pauvres sont prêtes à épargner. Et elles ne mettront jamais leur argent chez les banquiers. Jamais.
Mais ça a été fait dans des pays beaucoup plus pauvres que nous, Asma.
Je sais,
malheureusement. Et le digital aide justement énormément dans cet exercice d'épargne, surtout en milieu rural. C'est toute une culture.
C'est toute une culture.
On a largement dépassé ce que Roger nous a permis comme temps. Donc, je tiens à remercier. Thank you very much for your participation today. I've certainly learned a lot. Thank you, Philippe. Thank you, Your Excellency. Thank you, Reem, Asma, everybody else. I really enjoyed this session. Philippe, vraiment merci parce que je sais que tu as pris de ton temps et que tu as d'autres obligations. Voilà. Et donc, on a bien pris note de quelques suggestions pour des conférences futures. On a bien pris note de cela. Et je suis sûr que Roger va assurer le suivi. Voilà. Bonne soirée tout le monde et à très bientôt.
Merci.
Merci et au revoir. À la prochaine.
À la prochaine.
Thank you very
Ciao.
much.
Ciao.
Thank you.
Au revoir, Philippe.
Au revoir, à bientôt.